So when people approach me and ask me about what Spiritism is, first let us be just honest about it. It's the Spiritist Doctrine. And I always like to reinforce that, because I find that people have Spiritists, especially English-speaking Spiritists, they somewhat abhor the word doctrine. And they come up with all sorts of lame excuses, in my personal view, in my opinion, that say, oh, because doctrine is too close to indoctrination. Too close is not the same thing. They're two different words. So it's the Spiritist doctrine. And there is a reason that Kardec chose the word Spiritist doctrine, because he wanted to make it very clear that it would not be a religious institution, that would not be a religion, that would not be a cult, that it would not be a philosophy, and that it would not be anything else. A doctrine, which is a combination of different ideas, of different beliefs, all in agreement with one another. So we say that Spiritism is forged in a crucible where we have religiosity, we have science, and we have philosophy. When we put the three together, it ceases to be one, the other, or the third one, and it becomes Spiritism or the Spiritist doctrine. Much like we have the ingredients in our kitchen, and before we prepare anything, a pie, a dish, a cake, we can separate the ingredients, and we actually do so on the counter. But the moment that we finish that dish, that pie, that cake, you can no longer separate what is what. So Spiritism is forged from philosophy, science, and from religiosity. We need all three in Spiritism, because science without, for instance, a sense of wonder, which we get from faith. Sometimes people don't like the word faith, so I say, well, a sense of wonder. So science without that sense, and that without the respect, degenerates very quickly. And we can look at the history of humankind, and we'll see plenty of examples where very, very intelligent individuals that unfortunately lack moral fibers, what they did. We'll see many examples of that. So science requires somewhat the reins that the religiosity can provide. It also requires some of the guidelines that philosophy can provide, because science without the philosophy, it's like a horse that has no control, without any reins. Not necessarily for evil, but uncontrolled nevertheless. If we look from the point of view of the religiosity, if we don't have a scientific aspect to it, we derail into fanaticism. So we need. And the same religiosity without the philosophy loses purpose. Even if we are still looking forward to a creator, not knowing how to approach it logically makes us lose our purpose. And finally, if we now look at philosophy, why is it that philosophy needs science and where philosophy needs religiosity? Well, philosophy without the wonder, the sense of wonder or faith, can very quickly derail into nihilism, into pessimism. And without the science, it's theoretical and nothing comes into practice. So as we can see, these three parts inside of this crucible, they are forged into one thing. It's like an amalgam. And what we get from it is the Spiritist doctrine. And the Spiritist doctrine is here to give us primarily, we can start dividing later on, but primarily two things: consolation and education. The consolation for those moments when our hearts are aching. It's the departure of a loved one. It's a disaster that places us into financial stress, natural disaster, or some other type of disaster, human-made as well. At those moments, it's like when you're hungry, you cannot philosophize next to a person who's hungry. First, you have to placate the hunger. You have to feed that individual. The same thing here. If this individual is now aching, is now hurting, you have to provide consolation. And once you bring this individual into a more stable or even a less unstable situation, when you bring this individual to a form of a sort of balance, an emotional balance, then you can start educating this person. You will be able to give to this individual, to him or her, the reasons why things happen the way that they happen. And this is important because not knowing about life's pitfalls or about our own pitfalls, our own deficiencies, our own flaws, makes us prone to commit the same mistakes over and over again. So it's the second part, the education part. I think everyone has an instant. I would say most people would have an interesting story. Mine is pretty simple. I was an adolescent, very timid, really shy, but very curious, which was almost a contradiction in terms. But I kept the questions to myself, and I had a religious background, a particular religious background, and that religious background did not allow me the freedom to ask the questions. So it created an enormous conflict inside me because there were things I could not conciliate. For instance, I would go to school and learn all about the dinosaurs, well, not all about, but I would learn about dinosaurs. I would learn about paleontology in general aspects, of course, not as a at a college level. But then I would have to conciliate the fact that I had bones from 100 million, that were 100 million years old, with the fact that the Earth had been put together in 6,000 years, for instance, or thereabouts. So that to me, actually, it hurt. I didn't know how to deal with it. Being 15 years old, it was really difficult. And at that time, I had a colleague in high school, and I was tutoring him, math. And he happened to be from a Spiritist family, and his grandparents, he lived with his grandparents. And his grandmother in particular was a very ostensive medium. And she saw me when I came in, and she invited me to start taking part of the Gospel at Home, which is a meeting that most Spiritists do once a week normally, and it doesn't have to have a special day. Once you fix a day, you fix a day for yourself, but you don't have to be always, you don't have to be the same as your neighbors, for instance. It's the day you can, that time, but then you have to be disciplined to always hold the meeting on the same day and the same time, because the spirits come to assist us. So she invited me to their Gospel at Home. I came, and I was filled with questions, and it was very simple. We sat, it was a tiny table, and my friend was there, his grandparents. There was a person that lived with them, that helped in the house, that sat with us as well there. And she would ask my friend or myself even to read a passage, and then she would comment. And I just loved the fact that I could ask a question. The fact that I could voice the question, not even if I would get the answer, that to me was what captivated me. And I start going every week, and eventually, here I am. Continue to be a spiritist. Today I say I am a spiritist. At first I didn't know what to call myself, or perhaps a spiritist in training. It helps, I think, and I think this is not just for me, it's general. It helps because it gives us different perspectives. Especially when, I would say, because we all, as I said before, when everything goes all right, when everything is a bed of roses, we forget. We forget to be grateful. We forget to express gratitude. We forget to say thank you for this or that individual. But when things go slightly off, it was not according to plan, we are the first ones to cry foul, all of us. So I think, particularly when we have bad times, it allows us to place things in perspective and find alternatives, if not immediate solutions, at least alternatives to the problem that will allow us to suffer less, or allow us not to make the same mistakes over and over again. Even if we cannot correct that mistake we have already made, at least it prevents us from doing it again. But it prevents us not by condemning us or scaring us that we're going to burn in hell, or that we are going to, no, by educating us and showing to us why we are now experiencing those consequences and not the ones we had envisioned before. I think this is what is most important. So even if we cannot find an immediate solution, because we won't, we are the product of thousands of reincarnations. We are today experiencing some of the consequences of our past acts. So there are certain things we're not going to find solutions for right now in this lifetime, but it can help us cope with them, one, and two, prevent us from doing the same mistake over and over again.